Hi, I'm Donna Kallner. This unit of Intro to Looping presents basic elements of stitching and thread control for right-handed people. The first step in almost any project is to get a thread anchored. There are many ways to do that. I like to start students stitching on a mold, which simplifies the visual field so you can clearly see the structure of your stitches. For your first sample, you could just tie a thread around the mold using any old granny knot, but a wrapped base cord is more secure and the knot is less bulky. How you make a wrapped base cord will depend on whether you're right-handed or left-handed, but either way, cut a manageable length of thread, that's hip to tip as you learned in the previous unit for this class, and thread it on a tapestry needle, leaving a short tail. Wrap the thread around the mold 2 full times. Leave a tail the width of the mold pointing in the direction you'll advance as you stitch. If you're right-handed, you will advance from left to right. With your non-dominant hand, find a way to hold the mold that lets you keep the tail of the wrapped base cord in place while you get the first stitch made and make a few more stitches to secure that tail. To anchor that wrapped base cord, insert the needle from north to south, passing under all the wraps and the tail, then over the working thread. Draw the needle through until it forms a small knot. If you're right-handed, position the knot near the upper left corner of the mold. With the base cord knotted near the top of the mold, you have a firm anchor and the thread in place for your first row of stitching. The wrapped base cord should be snug enough that it doesn't slip easily off the mold, but has enough ease to let you stitch into it on the base row. The basic looping stitch feels like the movement used to anchor the wrapped base cord, except you won't pull it into a knot. To make your first stitch, advance a short distance from the knot. Be sure the thread tail is lying parallel to the wrapped base cord and pointing in the direction you advance so you can trap the tail with your stitches as you advance across the front of the mold. Insert the needle from north to south, passing under all the elements of the wrapped base cord, including the tail, and over the working thread. Now, draw the thread through, but don't pull it tight. You should see a little loop around the base cord. We're going to call that the stitch. The thread that advances from one stitch to the next we'll call the lag between stitches, or simply the lag. Make a couple of stitches into the base row, moving the needle north to south, under the base cord, and over the working thread. When you reach the edge of the mold, flip it over and continue advancing in the same direction. Advance across the wrapped base cord along the back side of the mold, adding stitches until you reach the point where you pull that very first stitch into a knot to secure the wrapped base cord. Make the final stitch on the base row next to, but not advancing beyond, the knot you made when you anchored the wrapped base cord. That completes the base row. The base row is actually at the rim of the pouch in this sample, which is stitched from top to bottom. Once you complete the base row, you keep advancing in the same direction, but you no longer insert the needle under the wrapped base cord to make a stitch. For the next row and beyond, insert the needle from north to south under a lag between stitches on the previous row and then over the working thread. Everything else about the stitch is the same as on the base row, except now you're stitching into lags. For your first sample, make one stitch in each lag on the previous row, working in a continuous spiral from the top or rim, that's the wrapped base cord, down. When you reach the edge or corner of the mold, turn it over so the opposite side is up, but it's still oriented the same way. You may have room along the side or edge of a mold for a stitch or two, maybe more depending on the mold. In a few rows, you'll see your work begin to form a straight-sided, tube-like sleeve of fabric around the mold. But before you get too far, let's take a closer look at thread control in looping. In the basic structure of the stitch, the thread moves from roughly north to south under the lag or base cord and over the working thread. Now, before you make a new stitch, press the thumb of your non-dominant hand onto the last stitch made and hold it there as you draw the thread. That will help maintain the shape of the last stitch while you complete the next one. Your dominant hand is free to manipulate the needle. Your non-dominant hand protects what you've already done. You will have greater control over the thread when your dominant hand is close to the work. So instead of pulling the thread through in one long motion as you extend your arm away from your body, keep moving your hand back close to the work and draw the thread through a little at a time. This is called stripping the thread. Curl the ring finger or pinky of your dominant hand around the short tail near the eye of the needle. This lets you drop the needle so you can use your thumb and middle finger to strip the thread, but it keeps the needle in position for you to pick it up again for your next stitch. As you strip, keep your elbow relaxed and near your side and draw the thread straight south, or as close to that as is comfortable for you. When you've stripped through all but a couple of inches of the thread with your thumb and middle finger, pause to adjust the tension and stitch size by goosing the stitch. Goosing is a small movement of the index finger to flick the thread into place as you strip the last inch or so. Your dominant hand is quite capable of performing stripping and goosing at the same time. Once that loop is in place, leave it alone. Don't try to alter it by tugging the thread or sawing it from south to north and then back again. After you complete a stitch, grasp the needle again to make your next stitch. It's right where it needs to be since you curled your pinky and ring fingers around the tail to control it while you stripped and goosed. Make a few more stitches, being really mindful of your thread control. North to south, under, over, press, strip, and goose. Let's take a moment to talk about the size of your stitches. There is no right or wrong size, no standard to which you should conform. But to make stitches that are relatively consistent in size, you must learn to allocate thread. As you advance from one stitch and position your needle to make the next stitch, you're pressing the thumb of your non-dominant hand over the last stitch made, right? Next time, before you press it down, visualize how much thread you intend to allocate to this stitch. Now, advance your non-dominant thumb just a tiny bit further before you press it. That protects the last stitch made and helps to control the size of the current stitch. And it does all that with your clever and useful non-dominant hand. So now, whether you're stitching into the wrapped base cord at the beginning of a project or into the lags between stitches, you'll move the needle from north to south, under, over, then allocate, strip, and goose. In looping, as in most things, what we tend to think of as advanced level technique is really some basic element executed with precise control and deliberate intent. Being mindful of your thread control now will take a lot of the mystery out of looping when you start playing with different materials and stitch variations. In short order, thread control will become second nature. But before that happens, you're going to run out of thread. I'll show you one way to add thread in the next unit.